and welcome to the Second Tier Podcast. I'm Ryan Dilks, and today we're joined by a commentator whose voice you will have heard on many an occasion if you're a regular viewer of Championship football. He's worked at Sky Sports for nearly 20 years and also commentated for TalkSport and the Premier League. It's Gary Taphouse. How are you doing, mate?
Yeah, very good, thank you. Thank you for having me on. What a pleasure.
No problem at all. We were just having a little chat before we started recording because the only headphones you had at your disposal were your big commentator headphones, which you're showing to the camera now.
I'm not going to wear them. Looks like I'm going skiing or something.
I mean, I thought it would look good personally, but we'll go with it anyway. You're very much a regular feature in the Championship now, aren't you? How many games have you done this season?
Yeah, gosh, I don't know the exact number, but it's such a pleasure to be working on the Championship. It's been a long time coming, actually. It's something I've wanted to do for a long time, and actually the pandemic helped me because there were a lot more games and they needed more people. So they said to me, you've been doing some red button Championship games for us. Would you like to do one or two live games? And I was like, yeah, of course, yeah, amazing. So my very first one was at Rotherham during 2020, fantastic, and it's just sort of snowballed from there really, and I'm very, very lucky because I'm doing quite a few games at the moment, and long may it continue because I don't have to worry about things like VAR and the like. So, and of course it's just such an exciting division, isn't it? So I get to work with some fantastic people. We're lucky. The EFL team at Sky Sports is amazing. It's just such a real pleasure to work with them, to be honest.
Yeah, I was going to say, how's it compare to the Premier League? Do you actually prefer commentating on the Championship?
Well, I'm lucky. I get to mix it up quite a lot because obviously I work for Match Choice on the Premier League World Feed. I also do WSL, and I do all three divisions of the EFL. So a bit of a man for all seasons, and I really like the variety. If they said to me, we just want you to commentate on the Championship full time, I'd be quite happy to do so. But I'm really happy doing a bit of this and a bit of that. It keeps your sort of rounded knowledge, and I get to work at a lot of different grounds and meet a lot of different people. But yeah, absolutely love the Championship. I mean, who doesn't? It's such a great division, isn't it? Because as every manager I speak to says, essentially everyone can beat everyone else, and you never know what drama's going to unfold. It's it's very, very different to the Premier League, obviously, in that respect.
Yeah, and that's why we bloody love it here on the Second Tier. Well, I thought it'd be interesting to chat to you because commentating's a very unique job, isn't it? So I thought it'd be cool to hear about the job in general, but I imagine there's plenty of young journalists out there as well who would like to learn more about getting into the industry, and then we'll have a chat about the Championship itself later on. So why did you want to be a commentator, first of all?
If I go right back to when I was a teenager, I remember watching Italia 90, probably a bit before your time, the World Cup that summer, and it was the first time I'd really sort of paid attention to the broadcast as much as the football. And I remember saying to my dad, these guys who are commentating, John Motson, Barry Davis, Brian Moore, etc. I said, is that their job? Do they do this for a living? And he said, yeah, of course, it's a job. He goes, not a job you'll ever do, but yeah, it's a job. And I just couldn't believe that. I just couldn't believe that was something that people did for a living, that you could go to a match and describe it for the viewers, and you could get paid for that. So from that moment on, I thought, that's what I want to do. And I then really got into radio in a big way. And of course, in London in the late 90s, Capital Gold was where it was at, Sony award-winning show hosted by Jonathan Pierce. And a lot of the commentators you now know came through that radio station. People like Steve Wilson, Bill Leslie, Ian Crocker, numerous others. They all started on Capital Gold Sports Time and worked their way up from there. And I just became an obsessive listener to Capital Gold. I'd be listening to it every single night, every weekend. and I kind of made it my mission to get on there. And it actually happened. I couldn't believe it. I was commentating for free on a club radio station, and our commentary position was next to where the Capital Gold reporter sits, and so I got to know them quite well. And sometimes Jonathan Pearce himself would be there commentating on the club. And I got chatting, and I just said, I'd really love the opportunity one day to do some reporting. And amazingly, a few weeks later, I was asked to go to Fulham against Northampton in the first round of the FA Cup. And instead of listening to Jonathan Pearce commentating, he was suddenly queuing to me at Craven Cottage, and I just couldn't believe it. I just thought I'd made it. I just thought that this is as good as it gets, really. I sat there for about 5 hours, terrified of moving in case I was needed at any point. And in reality, I think I only went on air about 3 times. But it was just the biggest thrill of my life, and that's how it all started for me. And I thought, right, I've started reporting. Now I really want to be commentating, and yeah, it was a long road of slogging away in local radio before getting the opportunity to work for Sky. But yeah, fantastic. And sadly, for anyone who wants to be a commentator now, that path to getting into commentary is gone. There's no local commercial radio covering football anymore. Obviously BBC local radio is still doing a brilliant job, but the commercial side of it has died, and a lot of people are coming through working for clubs themselves, maybe doing commentaries on YouTube, or BBC. So it has changed since I became a commentator, but yeah, that was always the recognised path at the time, and I'm very lucky I got to work in commercial radio, because it was great times, great fun.
Yeah, and it's a bloody hard job. I've had a go at it, and it's not for me, I don't think. It's a lot more difficult than I think a lot of people will give it credit for. So what would you say is the hardest aspect of the job?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to get used to when you first start, because I think when you're watching TV, you're obviously forgetting that the commentators themselves are not just listening to the crowd noise. You've got lots of people talking to you in your ear, wearing these big headphones. So you'll be in constant communication with the match director, who'll be talking about what shots are coming up next, what replays are coming up next. You'll be talking to them about what shots you would like. Perhaps you'd like to see a shot of one of the managers, or a chairman, or someone who happens to be in the director's box. And obviously he's also talking to all the various camera operators and the replay people. The producer will be talking. So you're hearing all of this all the time during the game. That was one of the first things I found very difficult to get used to, because working in radio is basically just hearing myself and the co-com, because your job in radio is just to keep talking and tell everyone where the ball is and who's got the ball. TV is very, very different, because people can see where the ball is and who's got the ball, so you've got to try and add value to the pictures. And then suddenly you've got all these people talking at you, and sometimes you have to zone out because it's not for you, and other times you've got to really listen because they are talking to you. So that was, I think people would struggle with that initially. Once you get used to that, obviously, like I said, you're not just there to talk for the sake of it. And one of the things that took a lot of getting used to for me, going from radio into TV, was learning when not to talk, when to say nothing at all. Because, we're all football fans, we all go to watch our clubs, and, when you're sitting in your seat, you don't have some irritant describing the action that you can see. You need, the person commentating needs to be telling you things that you can't see or that you don't know, and giving you a little bit of insight, because they've spoken to the people involved, or they've got a handful of really important stats they want to convey. And you'll know from watching the EFL on Sky, we're very big on corner box stats, bottom left hand corner. If it's getting towards the end of the game, have they scored a lot of goals in the final 15 minutes? What's their record at hanging on to a lead. So we'll try and incorporate that just to add a little bit of storytelling to the match that you can't see. So yeah, learning to do all that, that was the biggest challenge. And of course, you know, thankfully I've been doing it for so long now that it's kind of second nature.
Yeah. And with that being said, talking about how much you need to know heading into a game, how much research do you do before each game?
Yeah, well, again, we're very lucky there working for Sky Sports because we have a team of absolutely outstanding, dedicated statisticians who work their socks off on our behalf, essentially. And not just our behalf, on behalf of everyone. So if there's a live game, just a live championship game on Sky, obviously you'll have a presenter, you'll have studio guests, you'll have the producer, you'll have us, you'll have the reporter on site. And we all get a match pack which will be put together very lovingly by some of the stats team, and it will have a huge amount of information. I mean, way more than you need, really. And I condense that down to 2 sides of A4. So, you know, bits of information about the 2 teams and the managers, and then on one side, and then on the other side, a grid with all of the players' information. And 80% of it you'll never use, but you've got to have it just in case, because you never know what's going to unfold during the game. You know, you don't know, a young fullback who's never played before could come on and score a worldie, and you need to know about him. You know, the likelihood is he won't, but you need to be prepared. So the vast majority of our job is sitting in front of a laptop preparing, or sitting behind a steering wheel driving to a match. And actually only 10% of it is the fun part, which is being at the game commentating. That's the reality. I spend the vast majority of my time, and after we finish this podcast I'll be off preparing for the weekend. I'll be sitting in front of this very laptop for about 4 hours getting ready for tomorrow. So yeah, enormous amount of preparation. And like I say, that stat pack will go to everyone on the OB, not just me. So it's quite important for me to have my own research as well, so that I've got some information that isn't going to be used pre-match or at half-time, that I can use during the match, which I know no one else will have, which is why it's important to speak to everyone involved. Try and get some insight from the players as well. I always try and chat to as many players as I can pre-match, you know, when they come out to go on the pitch, just to clear up maybe things like pronunciation of their name, anything that they can remember about playing against these teams previously, just little anecdotes, anything just to add a little bit of colour, because that's what it's all about, isn't it? You know, you don't need me to tell you who's got the ball on the halfway line. You need me to add a little bit of colour to the game, particularly if it's not a particularly exciting game. If it's end to end, then the job does itself, and that's what we all want. But there's always a chance that it's not going to be like that, and we have to, sort of try and raise the standard of the broadcast up a bit with our words. That's the idea.
Yeah, I've seen loads of commentators post pictures of their notes before a game, and it's just this huge grid, and you're just like, how is this readable? How do you make sense of all of that? But you need it, don't you, in case something like, I don't know, Lloyd Doyley scores his first goal in 5 years, and you're like, I need to know how long it is. As you say, it may never get used, but if it does happen, like once in a blue moon kind of thing, you need to know for when that does happen. You talk about there how you've worked with loads of different people over the years. I was reading something the other day that said you've worked with more than 100 co-commentators. So without wanting to, upset anyone, who would you say is your favourite one to work with?
Oh man, I mean, that's impossible. The good thing is that I've really enjoyed working with all of them for various different reasons. What I would say is that the more you work with someone, the more you get to know them, they get to know you, you understand their style, they understand yours. So it flows better. That's what you want. And I think it's important to have a sort of a system where they know that if I'm holding the microphone here, then the likelihood is I'm going to be talking, and you don't want to be talking over each other. It sounds terrible. And I will actually put the microphone down so that they know I've finished speaking. and they can come in, because and if you don't have that understanding, then and the first time you work with someone that you're never entirely sure if it's going to be a winning combination. I worked with Chris Sutton for the very first time on Sunday at Norwich against Blackburn, and he was absolutely brilliant. And we had a really good understanding straight away. That doesn't always happen, particularly if it's a less experienced co-com, because we're always looking for people coming through who maybe have just finished playing, who are going to be good co-coms. And people think it's easy. It's not. Some people are made to be a co-com and some aren't. And a lot of ex-players prefer to be in the studio, the comfort of the studio, where you've got plenty of time to look at incidents before they have to comment. The one I've worked with the most over the years, and I'm going right back to my radio days and still working now, is Tony Gale, who obviously won the title with Blackburn in the Premier League all those years ago. But again, he spent so many years on Capital Gold before he moved into TV, and he spent time learning and understanding the role. And he just does it effortlessly. And if you say to him, look, can you go to this game, two teams you know nothing about, can you be co-com? He would say, no problem, because I'm there to analyse what's in front of me. Whereas a lot of the guys would actually panic and say, well, I don't know these teams very well, I haven't got time to do my preparation and research. He's a broadcaster now more than a footballer. So yeah, I really enjoy working with him. But like I say, I mean, gosh, the guys that I work with at Sky, they're all brilliant. I've done a lot of games with Lee Hendry, obviously Don Goodman and Andy Hinchcliffe, and I can promise you these guys work their socks off. The amount of preparation they do ahead of a game is mind-blowing. Some of them actually have more information than I do when we're standing there on the gantry. And again, they really make it their job to talk to everyone involved to try and get a rounded picture of the fixture. So yeah, they're incredibly hardworking, and I think that is very, very important in a co-com.
What do you make of the abuse certain co-commentators get? Because I see it quite a lot during games and on social media. Of course, if you're commentating on the game, then you may not have seen it, but I regularly see it when there's a live game, and co-commentators get a lot of stick for just simply giving their opinion. Yeah,
well, I think that's just the nature of the job, and it's the nature of social media. I think what you've got to remember is, a lot of the people watching support one of the teams. So they are, as a viewer, I'm going to be very careful here, but as a viewer, they are inherently biased towards one of those teams. So if you've got someone who is neutral criticizing one of those teams, the one that you support, then your immediate reaction is, oh, they're so biased. And the reality is the opposite's true. They're not biased, and actually you are biased. And the idea that someone who is a fan of a team is the perfect arbiter to decide whether a commentator is biased or not is obviously ridiculous the more you think about it. And what I would say is it's water off a duck's back for all of these guys. They're all very experienced. You'll notice that most of them aren't on social media because they don't need to read it, they don't need to see it. It's about doing a good job. That's what it's about. Is everyone on the OB happy? Have you analysed the game? Have you used the statistics that we have to give a broad picture? And all of those guys are just brilliant at it. And of course, it's also their job to give an opinion, and you might not agree with their opinion, but it's given in good faith, I can promise you. There's not one of those co-coms who is biased. If they did that, it would just be so crazy, because the producer would say, well, you're obviously biased, I'm not going to use you again. They're there to do a job. And it's like crossing the white line. You might be friends with someone on the opposite team, but once kickoff happens, you're there to do a job. And they might even support one of those teams, but once the kickoffs happen and you pick up the microphone, you're not a fan at the moment. You are there to do a job and analyse the game. So yeah, I think, as I say, they've been there, seen it, done it all. And and it doesn't matter to them at all. It's like they're focused on doing a good job.
Yeah. Let's put the spotlight on you for a sec, Gary. What's your favourite bit of commentary that you look back on and go, "Oh, Gary, that was some excellent work right there"?
Well, I generally don't think like that at all. It's really funny because I did a talk at a university last week, and I had several people come up to me and said, "Oh, I really enjoyed your commentary on this." And I'm thinking, God, I don't even remember that. And the idea that anyone pays attention to what I say, I find absolutely incredible. Excuse me. There's one or two goals over the years where I've thought to myself, it was really important to get that right, because I know it's a goal we're going to see again and again. And I'll give you an example. Dele Alli's famous goal for Spurs at Crystal Palace, which won goal of the season that year, when in his breakthrough season. And I was with Ray Houghton, and I thought what he said was absolutely brilliant. And I think I was really pleased with what I said. It was off the cuff, it was spontaneous. And for me, the best commentary is always going to be spontaneous, and not something that you've thought about in advance. That's just my opinion. We're all different. I know some people do actually quite like stuff which is a bit poetic, and might have been thought about before the game. That's not generally my style. So yeah, that's maybe one example. But yeah, I mean, for the most part, I'm just happy if the broadcast has happened, there are no big mistakes, everyone's got through it, and it's all gone well. So yeah, I generally don't I don't keep an archive of things I'm really proud of, because I always say it's not about us, it's not about me or the co-com, it's about the game, and we're just there to add a little bit of colour. Martin Tyler always said he was a sort of chief witness of the Aguero moment, and he was always very keen to say it wasn't about him, it was about the goal, and the fact that he was able to add some memorable words to it was a great honour, but it was never about him. And so that's what I always try to think of my own commentary. Yeah, and I was thinking about that actually, because a couple of years ago, I don't know if you remember, I was on air with Lee Hendry. It was Reading against Sheffield United, and John Fleck collapsed and had a seizure on the pitch, and that's just a really difficult moment, because you've suddenly gone from talking about a football game to a medical condition where you're all just sort of praying everything's going to be okay. And we didn't know how long it was going to last, or even if the game might be postponed, or the players might go into the dressing room. So that was a big challenge, and my rule there is, like, again, it's not about us. So I basically said as little as possible, because the worst thing you can do, I think, is speculate. We're not medical experts. And we just sort of said, we're all sort of hoping for the best here. And in the end, I think it was about 9 or 10 minutes. It was a very long 9 or 10 minutes for everyone. But I was really pleased that it was about him, and it wasn't about us putting our feet in it, as it were. That was a very challenging moment. There was another Champions League game I was doing where I was doing it from Sky, and suddenly it started snowing, and the players had to come off the pitch, and they said to us, "Look, you've just got to keep going because there's no studio here, it's just you guys, so keep talking." And I was with David Phillips, and we didn't know how long that was going to last, and we just sort of started trading snow stories from our youth until the players came back. And I think it was about 20 minutes. It was, again, a really long 20 minutes, and fair play to anyone that stuck with it. The thing about commentating is, and it is a crazy job, as you said, a bit unique, because where else do you have that many hundreds of hours of unscripted TV where you really don't know what's going to happen during a game? We can all say, for the most part, a game's going to happen. It'll probably there'll be a couple of goals and it'll all go smoothly, but you never know for sure, is there going to be something really extraordinary happen during this game? And you've got to be prepared.
Yeah, such a crazy job into it, and the idea of having to talk for 20 minutes and just fill is my kind of a nightmare, to be honest. Speaking of which, what's the funniest moment you can think of from your years of commentating? That must be quite up there.
Gosh, there's so many. I mean, unintentionally funny, I suppose. I won't name names here, but I was doing a game at Hull, and the co-com I was with, who was just one of the loveliest guys ever, he was very nervous about pronunciations, and we went through them all beforehand. And I don't know if you remember, there was a guy who played at Hull called Sei Olafinjana, who was a very, very good midfielder, and he was actually bossing it during the game. Absolutely brilliant. But the co-com was really struggling with his name, and we rehearsed it quite a few times, and of course I could feel him sweating every time he had to try and say it, and we had various different versions. And in the end, we're in the second half, and he said oily vagina instead of whole vagina. And the director, one of Sky's top directors, Sarah Cheadle, she just got the giggles, and I was hearing her giggling in my ear, and I was trying not to giggle, aware that we were going live to 200 countries because it was on the Premier League World Feed. And that was a very funny moment. And he made a few unintentional cock-ups during that game. Instead of I'm trying to think who it was. He called him Mancini. It was Mancien. He called him Mancini several times during the game. So I mean, there's nothing worse than getting the giggles on air. Honestly, it's because it's the last thing you want. But I could really feel it happening, and that was just one of those games. I was really glad when it was over. And to be fair, I don't think he did many more co-coms after that. He was in the studio a lot more. But yeah, that was definitely one. There's always something like that can crop up, and interviews as well. I remember we do a lot of interviews after the game too, and you never know how that's going to go. Sometimes you might get a manager who's in a really bad mood after a defeat, and this isn't funny, but it might be funny if you're watching. I've had managers who maybe tried to trip me up or just give you a load of one-word answers, and you've got to try and negotiate your way through that as well. So yeah, it's all fun and games.
Go on, you've got to name a manager now who you really struggled after a game.
Well, funnily enough, it's not necessarily a particular manager. It can just be the circumstances. So one of the worst ones I had actually was Rafa Benitez after in a Liverpool game when they'd only drawn. They should have won the game. And I thought he would be fine, but Sky played the interview so many times, and I was just cringing every time because I was just trying to keep it going, because he was just giving me really, really short answers. If I was getting 3 words, I was doing well. And my producer just said, look, this is not a reflection on you at all. I think we're playing it because it actually shows his state of mind rather than yours. And I think I got it up to about 90 seconds, and I was pleased with that. There's been once or twice where Mick McCarthy gave me a tough time, and funnily enough, I ended up doing some co-coms with him for TalkSport, and I reminded him of those occasions, and he insisted it never happened. Because with a lot of these managers, the match day persona is so different to the off-air persona when they haven't got the pressure of management. And with Mick McCarthy, it was like 2 different people. He tried to trip me up on air, and then when he was a co-com, he was just the most utterly charming guy that you could wish to work with. So I think that the pressure of management does strange things to people.
Yeah, I can imagine. What's the best individual performance you've seen while commentating on a game, Gary?
Wow, best individual performance. That's really, really tough. Because in my radio days, I did a few trips to Barcelona and saw Messi just absolutely killing it. There's a couple of times. There was once in the Champions League against Lyon when he was just incredible. A couple of times against Chelsea when he played quite well. So yeah, that's a really, really difficult one. There was a game when Tottenham put 9 past Wigan, and they scored 8 of those 9 goals in the second half, and Jermaine Defoe scored 5. But even though he scored 5 goals, he wasn't man of the match. It was Aaron Lennon who scored and set up a hatful of the others. And that was one of the best individual performances I've ever seen live. That was a real pleasure to commentate on that. And funnily enough, he refused to be interviewed after the game. we were practically begging him, and he said, yeah, I'll be back in a minute. And he went to the dressing room and went out through the fire escape to avoid our questions. So, some players just hate being interviewed, even after they've won 9-1, and it's going to be the easiest interview in the world. There's going to be no difficult questions. They just don't want to do it. And, not everyone wants to have a microphone shoved in their face. I'm not having a go at him at all. But I was so disappointed because it was such an incredible virtuoso performance.
Yeah, I do remember that game quite well. I forgot that Defoe didn't even win man of the match. That seems insane, doesn't it? I imagine you've visited pretty much every stadium in the EFL at this point. So what would you say was your favourite to work at?
I mean, when it comes to stadiums, I don't look at it like a fan. It's more about, again, is this a good ground to work at? So is there a good commentary position? Is the view good? Am I too far back from the pitch? How far is it to get from the gantry to do interviews afterwards if I'm doing that? Do I have to walk around the pitch and fight my way through supporters? So it's a different point of view when you're a commentator. What you really want is a fantastic gantry with an unimpeded view, not too far away from the touchline, not too high, not too low. Like the one at Portsmouth, for example, I've got a game there next month. It's actually quite low. You're basically just above dugout height, and that is very, very unusual. The camera's on high, but you can't commentate from up there. And I think they are looking to change it. And it's fine, but it's just really, really unusual. But of course, the atmosphere kind of makes up for it at Fratton Park. Whereas, just moving away from the EFL, if you go to West Ham, which obviously wasn't a stadium that was originally designed to house football, you are so far back from the pitch. It's not quite binoculars, but it is a very, very long way from the action, and there might be times where you think, do you know what, I could commentate off the screen easier because I can see if there's a goalmouth scramble, you just feel like you're so far away from it, whereas if you were just watching on the screen, you might actually have a better view. So that's how I see it. But yeah, I mean, there's so many in the EFL which are brilliant. I did a fair bit of Forest when they were in that promotion season. So I think that's just such a brilliant stadium. I'm a big fan of the old-fashioned stadiums. I really enjoyed going to Luton when they were in their promotion season last year, because a lot of it is about atmosphere, isn't it? And if you've got a good atmosphere, then that's, even if it's not the greatest match, it still feels like a great occasion.
Yeah. Have you been to every ground in the EFL?
No, I haven't done them all, I don't think. I'm getting there. I think if I factored in all the grounds I've done as a fan and a commentator, I'm literally down to the last few. So yeah, I would hope to do all of them in the next few years. But obviously, when it comes to working, you're limited to where the OBs are and whether you're chosen to work there. So I don't go to the producer and say, please, can I do this game? I'm told, and that's how it should be. And obviously geography plays a part. I mean, I live down in Bournemouth, and I do a lot of Bournemouth games, both Premier League and Championship, and equally Southampton is obviously just down the road from me, so it does make sense for me to do some of them. Portsmouth along the coast, Brighton further along the coast. I'm definitely Mr. South Coast.
Yeah, I was going to say Sunderland games. I imagine when you see Sunderland away, you're like, oh.
Yeah, I mean, I don't get to go up there very often, and that's a brilliant ground. Funnily enough, the last time I was in Sunderland was radio. It was I'd had a very, very long break from radio while I was working in TV, and I was doing must have been the 2014 World Cup for TalkSport, and they said, we'll give you a few games in the months building up to the World Cup, just so people get used to your voice on our station again. And the very first game they sent me to was Sunderland. And yeah, the press box where you commentate for radio up there is unbelievably high. I think it must be the highest commentary position in the country. And I thought, wow, this is a real baptism of fire being back in radio, because obviously you've got the combination of the height, the stripes where you can't really see the numbers particularly well, and it was pouring with rain, so visibility wasn't great anyway. And I thought, gosh, if I can get through this unscathed, then I'm going to have no problem for the rest of the season. And it was actually fine. I think it was an FA Cup game. Yeah, so and I haven't been to Newcastle for a few years either, because it's almost like going to a different country from when you live on the south coast. And those fans who live up there and go in such enormous numbers all around the country, I've got nothing but utter admiration for them, because the amount of planning involved and the amount of time they spend travelling is, well, it kind of eclipses even what I do for a living.
Yeah, I can imagine. Right, Gary, this is a rare chance for you to be a pundit for once now. I'm going to put you on the spot here and ask you for your predictions for the Championship season, considering you must have seen quite a bit of it at this point. I need you to put your neck on the line here. So first off, who do you reckon is going up this season in the Championship?
Well, I mean, it kind of looks done and dusted already, doesn't it? If you look at it purely dispassionately, without looking at the teams involved, Leicester have been a cut above, I think. I know they lost at home to Leeds last week, but from what I've seen, they just look the real deal to me. I think they're definitely going up. Obviously, the really interesting one is Ipswich, who've surprised us all, coming up from League One and having the sort of season they are having. And I did their game at Rotherham during the week. And obviously the last two games they've had to show a different side, because they've gone behind in both games at Birmingham and Rotherham and fought back. And obviously they should have won the game in the week. And obviously Rotherham a different kettle of fish at home. So just a couple of draws there, which has just allowed the teams coming up from behind to close the gap a tiny bit. I mean, I think it's still 8 points, isn't it? And it's been so long since Ipswich were in the Premier League. Was it 2001, 2002, I think? Yeah, a long time ago. I think just from a neutral point of view, I think it would be fantastic to see them back in the Premier League, see how they get on. I think Kieran McCann, absolutely brilliant young manager who I've got a lot of time for. So whether they do it or not, I'm not sure. Well, I'm certainly backing both of them, the two that are there now. Obviously, Leeds are waiting in the wings for Ipswich to slip up. And I really like what Daniel Farke's doing. I think he's really sort of finding his feet in that job now, and they're looking the real deal as well. So I think the likelihood is it's going to be two from those three, but I'm going to stick my neck out and go with the two that are there at the moment.
And then at the other end of the table, who do you think is going down? Because there's a few teams struggling down there this season, isn't there?
I mean, that's harder. that's a lot harder. It's difficult to stick your neck out on that one, because it's one that can change. I think we're going to see a fair bit of chopping and changing when it comes to the bottom of the Championship. I mean, looking at it right now, Sheffield Wednesday have obviously just had one win, and it's looking bleak for them because they're 9 points from safety. So I can't really make a case for them staying up. QPR have also changed their manager, and I think, Cifuentes is a little bit of an unknown quantity. He seems to be quite a demanding guy. He's got a 6-point gap to close. They've only won twice. Obviously, it can be done. They sort of halted the losing run with a draw, but he wasn't happy, was he? And then Rotherham, who, for so many years are sort of up and down. They'll have a relegation season, then a promotion season. They kind of stopped that last season, but they're right back in the mix of it again. So, if you look at the table right now, because there's a 4-point gap between Rotherham and Huddersfield, you're thinking to yourself, well, could it be those three right now? But, Huddersfield aren't impressing anyone, are they? And I'm sad to see Coventry City down there because, they made a real go at promotion last season. I think Mark Robbins is such an underrated manager, and they're definitely struggling at the moment as well. So if you had to really push me, I would probably go with the three that are there now. But listen, that's what we love about this division. It's just impossible to make predictions, and if you do, you look like a bit of a mug anyway. So I wouldn't put money on it, put it that way.
Yeah, and us being made to look a mug is something that we're very used to on the second tier at this point, having made lots of false predictions over the years. Final question, Gary, and this is probably the biggest question of all. Is the Championship the best league in the world? I think pound for pound, you can make a really good case for saying that. In terms of value for money, in terms of entertainment, in terms of surprises, in terms of the quality of football, in terms of overseas audience, I think people sometimes forget that obviously you've got the big 5 leagues, but the Championship is right up there in the top 10 most watched leagues. And that's why it has this world feed, which goes far and wide. Over 100 countries buy into the Championship. And part of that is because obviously it's the gateway to the Premier League, but it's also because of the entertainment value. So, as I said right at the start, I absolutely love working on the Championship, and I hope I keep doing so for many years. And yeah, I think, as I say, pound for pound, I think you can make a very, very good case for it being the best. How's that? Yeah. I'm not going to disagree with you, Gary. Listen, mate, thank you for your time today. Really appreciate you taking the time to chat with us, and all the best for the rest of the season.
Thanks so much.
This has been the Second Tier Podcast. I've been Ryan Dilks. We'll be back again on Sunday.